Hello, welcome to another episode of Inside the Huddle. Today is Monday, July 7th. This is episode 69 of the Inside the Huddle podcast. Thank you, as always, for joining us. Make sure to please like and subscribe. 4th of July weekend has come and gone, and we are just, about 3 weeks away now from training camp starting. A full week into July, getting closer. Hall of Fame game right around the corner, so slow period here is coming to a close. Blockbuster trade this past week in the NFL. We'll dive into that. We'll get to last week. We discussed our AFC divisional rankings. If you haven't checked it out, make sure to do so. That was last episode. Today, we'll take a look at some NFC divisional rankings and then going to ask some questions, true or false, for our two favorite teams, Jets and Cowboys. So we'll break that down later on as well. So good show here for you guys today to open up the week. DiMari, how's it going, man?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Like you said, we got like another 7 days to get through. Well, 3 weeks, but each week another 7 days, and you got another 7 days, and then boom, next thing you know, we are back at the Hall of Fame game. But even in the dead period, we did get a blockbuster trade, like you kind of just teased there. Kind of left field, kind of not at the same time. There's some speculation of some moves that might go on, but it seems like this team that decided to make a move, we spent a lot of this offseason kind of bashing them, and they finally decided to do a few things. So that's kind of exciting, shaking some things in inside the division. So yeah, but other than that, it's gonna be a good one. So let's get into it.
Yeah, you kind of were spot on there with just the initial assessment of this trade between the Dolphins and the Steelers. Felt like we knew this was coming for a while, right? We've talked about both teams actually, but the Dolphins as well. Even the last couple of weeks, the Dolphins specifically. Last week, talking about the AFC divisional rankings. Definitely spend some time just where they're going direction wise. Is this it for Mike McDaniel? What's the future of some of these core players, front office wise? Where do they go? We kind of knew for a while here that Jalen Ramsey was going to get traded, but what made this, out of left field, what made this a blockbuster was everything else that went on. You kind of just assume that Ramsey would get traded in what was a salary dump move, and Dolphins would maybe get a pick back, and that's it. But you get the rare player for player trade here. So the full details, and then the Dolphins also made a move a couple days ago as well that we'll dive into kind of on top of this, was Steelers will get Jalen Ramsey, Jonnu Smith, and a 2027 7th-round pick. And then the Dolphins in this get Minkah Fitzpatrick, so he returns to Miami, and then they get a 2027 5th. So Miami goes from probably just dealing Ramsey for a pick to dealing Ramsey, getting Minkah Fitzpatrick, also dealing Jonnu Smith, and then a couple picks involved there as well. That makes it the blockbuster, and that makes it a surprise. I'm interested, though, where you stand, because to be honest with you, I don't see, and I know a lot of people have taken both sides of this, I don't see there being an overarching winner of this trade. I just don't. I think a lot of times you come away from trades and there's one team that you feel 100% won the trade. Certain times you have to see how it plays out. But on the surface, just a kind of a week since this has happened, I can see why both sides it helps, but I also still see both sides, this trade, not necessarily being a negative impact, but still being holes and questions with both these teams. So I'll toss it over to you. What were your initial thoughts on this?
I might disagree with you a little bit there. I thought it was a win for Pittsburgh, and it's a win for Jalen Ramsey. And this is a team in Miami that we've kind of talked about, where things seem like this would be the beginning of the end, and I think that kind of solidifies this may be the beginning of the end for Miami. But yeah, I think I like the move for Pittsburgh, definitely. And you look at that DB room where you add Jalen Ramsey, which this is probably a blessing and a curse with how deep that DB room is. But you add Ramsey, you got Porter Jr., you got Juan Thornhill, Darius Slade, Deshaun Elliott, like your stack. That is a very great secondary, if you ask me. And I mean, maybe too early to tell, but just on paper, we're probably talking about a top 5 secondary in the league if everyone's healthy, just going off of production from these guys, during their time in the league. Obviously, Joey Porter being the younger guy, but how well he's been since, he's been drafted to Pittsburgh. And on the offensive side of it, I mean, we kind of knew Jonnu Smith thing was going to happen. This was thing that was kind of speculated some weeks ago, but we talked about how much they are in dire need of playmakers. It's almost like for us on this show, eat, sleep, brush your teeth, and talk about how much Pittsburgh needs a playmaker. It's been consistent, and they finally got one. And we both have said it where he's more of your receiving type of tight end, where Freiermuth is also a great receiver, but a lot of us probably prefer to have John Smith instead, coming off a career year in Miami last season. So, more weapons for Rodgers, more weapons to add to that defense that's already hard nosed. You know what you're going to get from that defense. So I personally really like the move from Pittsburgh, and I think this helps them contend inside that division with those offenses that we talked about. So much firepower. For Miami, I don't get it. I hate it for Mika Fitzpatrick. I know he does not want to be back in Miami where he started his career. It's absolutely awful, but like you said, it seemed like a salary dump more than anything. It doesn't seem like they got better. Pittsburgh got better. Miami kind of seemed like they flatlined. They stayed the same. I'm not really liking what the Dolphins did there, but hey, I guess it's a win for somebody.
Yeah, and I do agree with most of that. And again, I can kind of see both sides of it. I 100% agree from the Miami perspective. I know some people could probably make the case that in terms of right now, Minka Fitzpatrick, just where he's at age-wise, still playing at a high level, like is better. I don't really want to say future, but maybe right now than where Ramsey is at this point in his career. But you look at Miami's cornerback room, even with Ramsey, it was already a major problem. They've got nobody in there now. And in their tight end room, I'm sure we'll touch upon it, but they grabbed Darren Waller out of music, which is, I don't really know is going to do them much good. And they got rid of Jonnu Smith, who was their best playmaker last year, really. I mean, he was better than he put up top 5 numbers in many categories, all categories, receptions, yards, and touchdowns among tight ends last year. It was a career year. So, yeah, Miami perspective, and I'll even dive into that a little bit more. I guess the Pittsburgh thing, though, for me, it's just, I don't know. I'm still not feeling it with that. And the secondary in terms of Elliott and Thornhill, and you mentioned Joey Porter Jr., to me, though, Darius Slay and Ramsey at this point in their careers just doesn't strike fear to me into opposing offenses. And maybe this is just me, I don't know, we talk about Pittsburgh so much and I'm just gone like to the negative point with them, but you have Ramsey who's going to be 31 halfway through the season, not the same player once was. And Darius Slay is 34 years old. I mean, this is a guy that's been around for a while. Last season, you started to see, not just last year, but recently here, you've seen the drop off, like 34 years old, 31 years old with Ramsey. Maybe I'm just being negative with the whole Rodgers thing, but you look at the Steelers roster, to me, it's just a lot of old talent. And I just went through this with the Jets where they're stocking up on these old guys, hoping that they can get one more year out of them where they were not maybe one more peak Jalen Ramsey season, but try and get one more year out of Jalen Ramsey where he can be, what he was a couple years ago. Same thing with Darius Slay. Same thing with a 40-plus-year-old Aaron Rodgers. I like the Jonnu Smith thing. My only counter would be very good year, but last year was in some ways an outlier for him. Like last year's season for Jonnu Smith, he's never done anything close to that previously. And recently, Rodgers, throughout his career, he's done well, but just last year and even towards the end in Green Bay, him targeting tight ends kind of took a drop off. And maybe it's the talent that was there, but I mean, Pat Freiermuth, Jonnu Smith, yeah, he has them. How much will he use them? Or is it just going to be the Rodgers and DK show? So that would be my argument is Pittsburgh's secondary to me, even with Ramsey, just at this point in his career, I don't think elevates it that much. And in Darius Slay, 34 years old, not the same player. Like the Jonnu Smith addition, I do, but I have questions on how he's going to really fit all into that offense, the Freiermuth stuff, how much of Rodgers is really going to target him. And Miami, yeah, I mean, Miami is just an outright disaster. I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
There's really not much to say. I mean, we've talked so much about Miami, and it's almost exhausting. It's just, again, and we said it's from a team that was so close a few years ago, sitting at 8-3, before they got dog walked at home by Josh Allen. It's kind of sad to see the direction that they're in. And I mean, I guess it's quite ironic to see Darren Waller added to that, kind of knowing how his career ended and how you mentioned he went to music and he comes back. I don't know what to say about this team. Besides, a lot of my family are Dolphins fans, so I love to see this. I love to see the miserableness coming from Miami. I'm all here for it. But just from a logical standpoint, I'm confused. I don't know what they're doing, and it's just like they're in no man's land.
Yeah. I 100% agree. And like I said, even with we already knew that Jalen Ramsey was going to go. And you mentioned Jonnu Smith as well. He was more of, I guess, the under the radar one, but it seemed like for a while they're kind of unhappy with the contract. They ended up getting a raise anyway with Pittsburgh. But so he goes. But we kind of knew all that. But just looking at it now, it's so ugly. I mean, look at that cornerback room. There's not a single guy, not many guys in there that really scare you. I mean, just looking at the depth chart and just looking at some of the play. I mean, Kader Kohu, is that how you pronounce it? I always botch the name. He had a solid year last year.
He's solid.
Yeah, he's like the best one, just breaking down the roster and getting ready for this. Storm Duck doesn't move the needle. Cam Smith, Isaiah Johnson, Ethan Robinson, Ethan Bonner, Artie Burns, Kendall Sheffield. There's just no names. Couple UDFAs in there. Couple guys that just haven't done a whole lot. I mean, Storm Duck came in last season, not much of a factor. There's just a bunch of unproven young talent. It's young, it's unproven. Maybe they hit on one of these two guys, but it's a disaster, really. There's nobody at back there. And in tight end, sure, you go out and trade for Darren Waller. Darren Waller hasn't been in the league. He took a year off. He's been doing music. I mean, how much football activity has Darren Waller actually been doing? Right. And his last couple years were ugly. I mean, we can really make, it's not even making the case. It's a fact. Darren Waller, and I get it was injuries, right? He only played 20 games between 2021 and 2022, so he missed a ton of time there. But Darren Waller hasn't been the player that he was since 2019 and 2020 was the last time he had two 1,000-yard seasons back-to-back. Since then, it's been injury-prone, and he went to the Giants and was a complete shell of himself. Year off, you expect him to come in and replace the production of Jonnu Smith, and then you look at the tight ends behind him, Julian Hill, Tanner Connor, Pharaoh Brown. Pharaoh Brown is the only one in that room prior to the Darren Waller trade that caught an NFL touchdown. He was the only one. Now with Darren Waller there, of course, that changes, but that's terrible. I mean, the cornerback room is terrible. The tight end room is terrible. Even without this trade, we've talked about it, they were heading in the wrong direction. I have some serious doubts I have some serious questions if you're even going to see like Tyreek Hill, any of these guys back. Like, is this a complete overhaul where they're at this point next season? They're in a really interesting spot. It feels like they're trying to retool, rebuild a bit, although they're in the midst of, you would say, Tua's prime, and they've got a superstar receiver and a very good number two, but yet they're like, it just does not make sense what they're doing. Their plan doesn't. And we've kind of seen this now for a while, right? We said it last week, said it 2 weeks ago. We've said it many times. They've been plateauing. They've been plateauing to getting worse, and now they've tanked. So there is a chance. Is it as bad as finishing last in a division?
Yeah, it's a possibility. We've talked about the Patriots being better. We don't know how many games better, but definitely talk about them taking another jump with Drake May this year. They've added some pieces. Won't go too much in detail about New England again, but it's not ridiculous to think Miami finishes last. That's the trajectory they're kind of on right now.
Yeah, 100%. Terrible spot, but don't worry, they have Zach Wilson backing up Tua, so that's good insurance. Again, we touched on the Pittsburgh angle. That's really it. I would say, from a Pittsburgh standpoint, they're going all in. It's the 1 year with Rodgers here. They're going all in, stocking up on some of these veterans, hoping that they can, get more out of these guys, get something out of these guys, turn back time a bit. And with Miami, they're directionless. I don't even want to say that they're rebuilding or retooling. they feel like they don't have a direction right now, and that's the worst spot you could be in. So that's the Steelers-Dolphins blockbuster trade. Definitely a surprise on whatever. I think this was June 30th, the end of June, but the NFL always finds a way to surprise us. So that's that. All right. So last week we did our AFC divisional predictions. This week we're going to do our NFC. Last week we did AFC North, AFC West. Definitely a little bit of difference there. We both agree, though, that it was the AFC South or AFC East and then the AFC South in fourth. So this week, taking a look at the NFC. I'm not going to say what I said last week because I thought the AFC West was obvious last week, and obviously you were on board with the AFC North. I think it's obvious, but who's your number one this week?
This one's actually tough. Now that I look over it again and I kind of think about how teams have looked in those divisions, it's not easy. It's not as easy as I thought. But right now, I'm gonna go with the North. I'm gonna say the North is first. I don't know if we're on board there. The East makes a very, very strong case, but we're gonna go with the North, and I think this comes down to kind of how we mentioned last week between AFC North and the AFC West, where it really comes down to the bottom of that division. So right now, Chicago being the worst one, the Giants being the worst one. You lean Chicago, but from the North as it is, and I just think you got to give it to them. We see what Detroit has done. We still think Detroit's going to be good. It seems like for a while this is going to be a competitive team, always in the mix. Green Bay is another one of them. Minnesota had a very good year last year. Won't have that same year this year at all. That will shock the world, but I think it's still a good Minnesota team capable of winning, 9 games, maybe 10. So yeah, I'm gonna go with the North. I think that's the strongest division. That's probably the best odds to get all 4 teams in the playoff. That was a possibility. So I think we're both on board number one, though. It seems like.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sticking with the North this week, not going to the West. I agree. I think it's the NFC North, and I actually think this is probably a bit more obvious than the AFC. I think the AFC Northwest is probably a bit of the closer debate. Maybe it's about the same, whatever, between the East and the North here. But I totally agree with your assessment. It's the bottom. You look at the Giants, you look at the Bears. Giants 3-win team last year. Bears, of course, the 5-win team. First year with Caleb Williams. You fire your coach midway through the year. Who's more likely to have the bounce back at Chicago? You get the hottest coordinator on the market in Ben Johnson. You get his coach, the offensive mind, the offensive genius. We'll see if that happens. You rebuilt that offensive line completely with a couple of trades. You look at that offensive line now, and on paper, it has potential to be a top 10 unit in the NFL, which is a big deal for Caleb. We've talked a lot about, the Bears, just their weapons in general. DJ Moore, you see if Odunze could take a step up this year. Caleb Williams himself taking a step up. So I agree with the North. If there was a possibility, that would be the likely division to get all 4. We've talked a little about the Lions. It feels like we said this, I think, last week. This is the first time since their run started with Dan Campbell that there's a bit of negative energy around them or a bit of questions around them. And I think a lot of that stems from the first round exit last year in the divisional round to Washington at home. And then you losing your 2 coordinators, of course, Glenn to the Jets and Ben Johnson, like I just mentioned, to Chicago. So how do the new coordinators look? How does the offense look? How are they able to bounce back from such a tough exit when it seemed like they were number 1 seed? They were the team to beat them in Philly. So that's interesting, but they're still loaded with talent. We've said a lot with Minnesota, right? JJ McCarthy, although you still have to see it, that's not a hard offense to have success in with Kevin O'Connell and the weapons they have. And in Green Bay is still one of the youngest teams in the NFL. Jordan Love's got to be able to stay healthy. Got banged up, of course, towards the end of last year, but the talent there and the young pieces on that receiver room, whether it's Matthew Golden you added, you got Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, of course, kind of leading the way there. Young team continuing to get better. Another year, Jordan Love. Green Bay will be right in the mix as well. So I agree there with the North. Number 2 is the East, and I assume you're on board with that.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's another obvious. You got Super Bowl champ, Washington obviously doing what they're doing, and I think maybe I'm drinking the Kool Aid here, but I think Dallas is going to be a lot better this year than last year. And again, it's just the Giants, so yeah, East at 2.
Yeah. The biggest thing with the East to me with that could make it not weaker, but the big question is just Washington in year 2. What type of Commanders team, what type of Jaden Daniels are we going to get? Is it going to be a second year explosion after year 1? Or are we going to see a bit of a regression from Daniels where they go from a 12-5 team to a 10-7 team? And that might not even be a regression. That could also just be the Cowboys should be better this year. And 2 times you face them, of course, are going to be a lot tougher. Giants are also going to be a bit better this year as well. You've still got Philly in that division, so you might have 1 or 2 more losses from that perspective. But yeah, Philly at the top, Dallas, and then the Giants, I think, will be improved, but it's not a playoff team. Unless if Russ and Jackson Dart and Jameis Winston lead them to that. But I agree with the East. Number 3, I'm going to go West. What are your thoughts on number 3?
Yeah, I'm right with you with the West. I think this is about the most obvious rankings that we probably could have done, just as far as how the teams line up. But yeah, I'm with the West.
Yeah. The big question with the West is who's going to come out first place. You can kind of make the case for, is San Fran going to have a bounce back season? Are the Rams going to, what are the Rams going to be? The Rams are going to be good again, but I think a big question is San Fran. Seattle, what do you get out of Darnold? Improve receiving core, Cooper Kupp. Who do you think finishes first in that division?
I think it's going to be the Rams, and I don't know if I said this here on a few recent shows, but I think the Rams are going to be representing the NFC in the Super Bowl this year. So I'm all on board the Rams to kind of hopefully prove me right.
Yeah. I tend to agree. I'm really interested in what we get out of San Fran. That's a big question. I think if you get a revived, healthy San Fran team, they could certainly challenge them, but I really don't know what we're going to get out of San Fran. Arizona, I think, probably drops back down to the bottom, which is, I guess, kind of expected. Maybe them in Seattle, who knows, because you don't know what you're going to get at Darnold, but I agree with the West. And in the South is the NFC South. I mean, this is the worst division in football. I would say it's probably worse than the AFC South, right? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not, actually. Looking at it might not be. Well, I don't know. What is it? AFC South, NFC South?
I'll say AFC South is by far worse. I think we're gonna get to see more potential from a few teams. Atlanta might be decent. Hopefully they improve with another year. We both think Carolina is going to be fairly better, and I just think overall all 4 of those teams are way better than the other 3 in divisions. With Houston just carrying it.
Yeah, I'd agree. Bryce Young should improve this year. We know we've done enough crushing of New Orleans. I don't think they need any more of that crushing. Obviously, we've definitely bashed Kellen Moore, Tyler Shook enough. But yeah, Carolina should be improved. We'll see what we get out of Penix. Tampa Bay should be right in the mix. I mean, they're obviously, been the first place the last couple of years. Actually extended Bowles, which is, I'm happy for Bowles, but I still can't believe that he's having success. Here we are, another former Jet having success elsewhere. What else is new? Who has the better year, Penix or Bryce Young?
I think it's going to be Bryce Young. I'm still not a firm believer in Penix, and it might just be Atlanta's offense and how they've looked. But I think Bryce Young takes that jump, and again, won't go too much into detail about it. But you mentioned that him being benched probably did a lot for him, and I think we're going to see, the reason why he was drafted where he was.
Yeah, I was also looking at some rankings earlier today, just some offensive line stuff, And, Carolina's obviously invested, whether it's Equanu 2 years ago in the draft or 3 years ago now, 6th overall. They obviously paid a ton for Robert Hunt from Miami last free agency. They've done a lot to build up that offensive line. I think that's another big deal. They finished last year. I was just doing some research earlier today. They were the only team in the NFL to finish top 10 last year and not make the playoffs offensive line, which shows you how important offensive line is. But 9 of the top 10 teams from Pro Football Focus offensive line rankings finished or went to the playoffs. Eagles were number 1. They, of course, go on to win the Super Bowl. The reason I bring that up is the Panthers went from, in a very short time, a destination where any quarterback should run from to all of a sudden Bryce Young gets benched, comes back, looks good. The rare player gets benched and comes back better. At least recently. I feel like those examples come from a long time ago of guys getting benched and coming back. Recently, it hasn't been very good, at least off the top of my head. But you look at that team now, and they added Ted McMillan. They've still got Thielen, Xavier Legette now, in year 2. Bryce Young feels like kind of year 2 for Bryce Young. Like now, like feels like since the benching, it's like not another career, but it feels like that was a checkpoint. Now it's okay. Now let's see what you can do. Of course, Hubbard had a huge year last year out of the backfield. But yeah, quietly, they've went from a team that you want to be scared of if you're a quarterback, a terrible spot, to good coach, quarterback that's played well to end the year, couple good weapons, good offensive line, good running back, and a division that's gonna have a lot of winnable games. Both those games are gonna be winnable. I agree. I think Bryce Young has the better year. I still have questions about Penix himself plus that offense. Talk a lot of, we know what the Saints are. Those are 2 games, and Tampa Bay is not a juggernaut by any means. So Carolina's gonna be a threat. They're gonna win some games. They're kind of like that sneaky, every year you get that under the radar sneaky wild card team. They might be that this year. They might be that Denver type of team this year where they sneak in, maybe a bit of a slow start, but they just sneak in 9-10 wins and maybe lose in the wild card round, but get in. The biggest thing is, of course, what happens in those other divisions. If you get 3 out of the NFC North, and let's say this is where it's tough, because last year you got 3 out of the North, and then 2 out of the East, and there was only 1 out of the South and the West. That's what's so tough about the NFC, and just in general, is assuming you're going to get 3 from the North. That's what's crazy is unless if one of the North teams don't make it, let's say Minnesota doesn't make it and it's just 2, then maybe a team like Carolina jumps. But, is Carolina going to be better than San Fran and Seattle, who could be fighting for that final spot? That's what's interesting with the NFC. Like, if 3 NFC East teams make it, and this is any conference, but if Philly, Washington, Dallas make it, then one of Detroit, Minnesota, Green Bay, Chicago can't make it, which is, interesting after a year worth all, 3 of them made it. Chicago will be improved. And in the West, the Rams, let's say, make it, but then does that mean it's interesting? It's interesting to see how it'll all end up playing out, but we'll definitely, I'm sure, discuss this a lot more in once season preview. What will be your early NFC playoff?
So honestly, I think 2 make it from the NFC East. I think it's going to be Philly and Dallas. I'm not on the Washington train this year.
So you think
I think they're going to have a little bit of a. I think Washington
Mm-hmm.
barely misses at like 9-8. I think they just miss out. We're going to go Dallas and Philly in the East. Then you get Green Bay and Detroit in the North. The West, I'm definitely going to go with the Rams. Probably go with San Fran. I don't know. San Fran's a tricky one. Like, they're in that similar boat of Dallas where, and, it's just they're in that same boat with Dallas where you kind of look at the last 3 years, like, this team has been so good, so consistent, always in the mix, but you are only as good as your last year. So for San Fran, it's kind of hard to say, but for now, we will say San Fran possibly gets in with the Rams, and then one in the South, which I think we both think will be Tampa. But
Yeah.
again, kind of depending on what you get out of Dallas, kind of depending on what you get out of San Fran. Yeah, Carolina could definitely make a jump, but way too early. I think the South gets one, Carolina just misses out, and every other
Yeah.
division gets two.
For some reason, the South, and it's funny because it's not a strong division, but for some reason, like the North is the AFC North's a division that you feel like they would just beat the crap out of each other. The South feels like that, not for good reasons. It just feels like they're all not good. That your division winner is going to be a 10-win team. The second place is going to be 8-win team. The South, it's weird I just don't. Two teams out of the South does not feel right. It's interesting. I think if there was a division to have three teams, I don't know. And I guess this kind of counters what I said earlier about the North, but I think it's probably more likely Minnesota, let's say, would miss it than Washington. But you could be right. If they have a second-year slump and Dallas is improved, and I mentioned that earlier, probably go from 12 to 10 just because the division's going to be better. But yeah, I mean, if you would and I guess you could have 2 and 2 out of both those. You could have Philly, Dallas, and then Minnesota or Detroit, Green Bay, and then go 2 somewhere else. It's interesting to see what happens. The big curveballs in all this will be what Minnesota gets out of JJ McCarthy. And I like JJ McCarthy, but we got to see. I mean, he's thrown a couple passes in the preseason. That's it.
Yeah.
And then what Jaden Daniels and the Commanders look like in year 2. Cowboys as well, right? First year under Schottenheimer. How do they look? Philly coming off the Super Bowl hangover. They a team that gets off to a slow start that allows Dallas to win, and then Philly's a wild card. Who knows? We'll see. But yeah, always interesting to break down the playoff. NFC is always interesting, especially because it's stronger. You had a 10-win team last year, and Seattle missed the playoffs. The AFC, usually you're fighting 9. If you have 9 wins, you're pretty close. 10 wins, you're in. NFC, you win 10 games, there's no guarantee you're in. All righty. Let's get to true and false, because I think that's it for the division. So you got a couple true and false questions for the Jets. I got a couple for the Cowboys, so we'll throw it back and forth. Did this last week. If you want to check that out, make sure to do so. Just NFL. We had 4 random NFL questions. I think that's where you predicted the Rams to be the Super Bowl, because I asked if this was Stafford's last year. I think that's where that might have came from. So, yeah. 4 questions last week. Couple questions this week. Cowboys, Jets. Let's dive into it. You wanna kick us off? I think you did last week.
Start us off. True or false? Justin Fields will lead the Jets to their first playoff appearance in 14 years.
My heart says true, but my gut tells me false. No, I don't think so. I don't think the Jets are going to make the playoffs. I think they're I've said 7-10. It's been my prediction. I don't really think I'm probably going to switch off of that. I don't see myself dropping a win or gaining a win. Who knows, though? The training camp hype never fails, so we'll see what happens. But I think they're a 7-10 team. I think this is a Jet team to me that and I hope I'm wrong, and there's a shot that they are a playoff team and they can get in as a 7 seed. If they run the ball well, identity-wise, they're finally going to have an identity, run the football, win in the trenches, good offensive line, top 10 unit it should be, maybe top 5, we'll see. And if you are a top 10 unit, I just mentioned earlier, on the offensive line, you should make the playoffs. But I think this is a Jets team to me that'll be competitive. I think they are similar to the 2022 Lions. Glenn, the connection's obvious there. That 2022 Lions team started slow, finished strong, finished at 9-8, and in the next year made the playoffs, went on that run. I could see that being with the Jets here, where they win 7-8 games this year. I think they kind of weather the early storm with the schedule. The schedule starts tough. It's not a gauntlet by any means, but it's tough. Your first 2 games at home, You got Pittsburgh right away. Mike Tomlin, AFC North, tough matchup. And you got Buffalo. And while you play Buffalo, they always play Buffalo and Josh Allen close at home. You're facing Josh Allen and the Bills still. So they're a top team in the AFC, top team in your division. They're a threat. Tampa playoff team. Miami, although we've just bashed them, divisional games on the road in prime time are never easy. Denver, all that stuff. So I think weather the early storm, and then second half, they've got a lot of winnable games. That's all on paper. So we'll see if that's the case, right? A lot of times things change. But I think they second half finish strong, get into the hunt. They'll be on all the CBS, Fox graphics of in the hunt, the Jets. I think they'll be there, which as a Jet fan, I'll sign up for that because they're never there. So that is, that's okay. But then they're 7-10. I think 2026 is probably it. I think Fields is okay this year. I think he's a bridge quarterback. They are picking, let's say 10, 11 maybe. I think they'll maybe trade up. Who knows? This is so down the road. But then they get their quarterback, and that's really when the clock starts. That's what my gut tells me. My heart tells me they can make the playoffs. And look, it's not out of this world to say they can. And I've said this forever. Rebuilds don't last forever. Jets are a significantly more talented team now than when Robert Saleh took over. If they just get average coaching, they should be from 5-win team. They should automatically be 2 wins, 3 wins better than that. And defense improves. Who knows? Maybe you stumble into 9, 10 wins, but I don't think so. What about you?
Yeah, I'm right on board. We talked about this last week with the AFC West and how we think, there's some crazy way where 4 teams somehow get into the playoffs. You talked about Buffalo. We neither one of us think the Jets are winning division, respectfully. The North, we know about the North. We think, Pittsburgh is a question mark now with all the moves they made. I just think that the conference is so loaded with more proven teams, although the Raiders aren't proven, but the Jets kind of on that same level as far as, what potentially can be. I think the AFC is just way too loaded, and it is a conference where you have to already be proven. Your quarterback has to be proven unless you have, a heck of a head coach. Glenn being the first-time head coach. There's so many question marks surrounding the team, so I don't think this is the year the Jets do it, but depending on how this year goes, definitely could be talking about the Jets next year, in some playoff football.
Yeah, I agree. And you're spot on there. The AFC North, AFC West, in my opinion, it's going to produce 5 from those 2 and 3 somehow, I think. It can't produce 6 because you got the 2 other divisions, but you're going to have 3 or 2 from the East or the West, 3 or 2 from the North, in my opinion. I don't think you're getting 2 from the South. So that's 5 right there. And then you're probably getting the 1 from the South and then the 1 from the East. That's probably what happens. And the Jets aren't winning the East. Maybe if Cincy's defense stinks again and Pittsburgh with Rodgers just doesn't work, and who knows, the South is still terrible and there's only 1 team from the North, and then it's a battle of, okay, let's say it's, I don't know, a battle between, I don't know, Jets and I don't know, the Steelers, I guess, if they were fighting for it, who knows, maybe, but yeah, I agree. It's tough. So you need elite quarterback play in this league, and I would love to see that from Fields, but I don't think they will. They'll be a scrappy team, though. I do. I think they're going to win some games that they probably shouldn't. They'll probably lose some games that they shouldn't because that's what the Jets do. But then I think they'll be much more enjoyable and easier to watch than last year. But I don't have much further expectations from than that. All right. Cowboys. I'm going to go kind of with this statistical question here to start. So CeeDee Lamb, best season came 2023. 1,700 yards, 12 touchdowns, 135 receptions, all career highs by a lot. Now, that's the only time he surpassed 1,500 yards. So my question is, George Pickens alongside him, Dak Prescott back in the fold healthy. CeeDee Lamb will have 1,500 or more rushing or receiving yards and 10 or more touchdowns. He's only hit 1,500 yards once, which was 2 years ago, and his high was 12 touchdowns. It's the only time he had more than 10. So number 2 next to him, not George Pickens back. But Dak Prescott back, big year for CeeDee Lamb. True or false?
I'm gonna go true. That's my offensive player of the year, so I think I'm gonna go true with that one. Um, that was a great question. That was a great question. And I've talked about it all off season. When George Pickens was acquired, how he's going to open up that offense so much and open up so much for CeeDee Lamb. And I kind of reiterated again, Pickens looking for a contract year, is going to try to go out and prove himself. So, Pickens also looking to have a pretty big year. Dak is coming off of not a full season, but the year before that, arguably could have won MVP. I don't think the guy, tore his hamstring and forgot how to play football. Still a very good quarterback. According to our QB rankings, a top 5 quarterback. I think we had him. So I think all three of them have a big year. But yeah, CD with so much more to prove and so much more help with George Pickens on his side. They're going to need both of them in a big way to not only win the division, but to stay competitive and also finally, hopefully, get over that 29-year curse, 30-year curse of not ever seeing an NFC championship. So I'm going to say true. I think CeeDee Lamb has a very, very big year. Not like he had the 1,700 yard year, but I think he's going to have a very big year.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you look at the year he had, of course, those 1,700 yards. It was the last time Dak played all 17 games because 2022 he missed some time, only played 12 games. CeeDee Lamb finished that year with 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns. Let's say Dak plays all 17 that year. You're probably looking at over 1,500. Let's say maybe an extra touchdown. But I agree. I think he'll be around. I agree with you. I don't think he'll be 1,700 yards good. That's almost top of the league. That's things that are only really done once or twice in your career. But I think it's realistic to say he'll be 115 receptions around that range, right? 115, maybe 120 and 1,540, 50 and 11 touchdowns, 10 touchdowns maybe.
Yeah.
I think that's realistic. And we're both very big believers in this Cowboys offense with Pickens. Dak being back is obviously huge. We've talked about it a lot on this show, just Dak in general. So I agree. I think I'm going to say true as well. He'll have a big year. All right. Jets, second question. Hopefully they have more wins than questions asked here.
Let's see here. I think this one feels interesting. True or false, Zach Wilson is the biggest Jets draft mistake in history?
Yes. I'm going to say true. Now, there's been some really bad ones. And this is a good question. I could spend all day on this. There's been some really bad ones. But with Zach, and even because he was so much worse than Darnold, with Zach, though, and a lot of people, the biggest argument to Zach is Vernon Goldstein, who the Jets drafted in 2008, 6th overall, was terrible. Complete bust, complete blow up out of Ohio State, was a complete disaster. That was, up until Zach, the biggest draft bust in NFL history. And some Jet fans will still argue it's Vernon Goldstein. But what makes it bigger for me for Zach is he's a quarterback. Quarterback, while edge rusher is a very important spot, rushing the passer, quarterback's the most important position there. This position the Jets were in, that was Joe Douglas's guy. That was the new regime's guy. They went out the year after, got Garrett Wilson, got Breece Hall. They built up everything around him. They got Elijah Vera Tucker in that same draft. They built up the offensive line. Well, it's not what it was now. It was, built up enough. Still some holes, but they got him playmakers. Like, they did so much more for Zach than McCagnon, Gaze did for Darnold. And Darnold was obviously didn't work out, but Zach was significantly worse than Darnold, like just looking at the numbers. And just watching him play, Zach looked lost. So I agree he was. And look, forget about that's true, but forget about just Jets history. Zach Wilson, Jamarcus Russell, Ryan Leaf, all those guys, he's amongst the biggest busts in NFL history. Not only was this guy picked, it's one thing to be picked 2nd overall and not work out. It's another thing to be picked 2nd overall and legitimately, all jokes aside, he should not even be in the league right now. I mean, there is probably your Thanksgiving flag football Turkey Bowl champions out there, that play football once a year in the Turkey Bowl that could probably play a better NFL game than Zach Wilson. I mean, I could count on my fingers how many games Zach Wilson, probably on one hand, not two, probably on one hand, I could probably count on fingers the amount of games that Zach Wilson played where he looked like a okay NFL quarterback. That's how bad it was. I mean, so many times, we don't have to go through the Zach Wilson stuff. We all know how bad he was, but yeah, Jets history, definitely. NFL history, arguably the biggest bust. I think him and Jamarcus Russell are right up there. He was terrible. He was awful. I mean, he was just awful. Couldn't move the ball. I mean, the decision-making was terrible. The amount of times he just takes sacks, he was just so bad. And unfortunately, the Jets got fooled by a couple passes in shorts at BYU, and they said, sign me up. I'm taking this guy second overall. And unfortunately, Frank Gore, Adam Gase took the Jets out of the running for Trevor Lawrence. Although hindsight 2020, I don't really know if that would make much of a difference. I mean, Trevor's better than Zach, but is Trevor, we talk about Trevor, but number one overall quarterback, he's not the number one overall quarterback that you think is going to elevate your franchise or should have done. So, yeah, by far, he's definitely the biggest bust. And that's saying something because the Jets have swung and missed a lot on quarterbacks. And just in general, they've swung and missed on a lot of players in general, not just Zach, but I could go down the list of some of the guys that they swung and miss on in the first round just over this last decade. It's pretty ugly. And Zach tops all of them. So I agree. What about you?
Yeah, I'm right on board. I'm not going to, say too much, but I'm going to go with true. You grab somebody with the second overall pick, and you expect them to be the guy. And you said it doesn't always work out. We've seen a lot of quarterbacks not work out, but all the hype around Zach, and like you said, built the team for Zach for it all to mean nothing. I mean, it's terrible. You'll never get that pick back. And I know, obviously, but it was one of those things where you look back and you're like, there's so many other options that we could have went, and this is what we decided to do. I'm definitely on board. Biggest mistake the Jets have probably ever made.
Yeah, and it's crazy because it's funny because a lot of that fan base, now I will be 100% openly admitted to it. I was okay with the Zach Wilson pick. I wasn't pounding the table for him, but it was kind of one of those things that you accepted it because that was probably one of the most obvious 1-2 picks in the draft. Like we all knew Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson were going 1 and 2. Maybe there was a couple people that said Fields, but for months we knew it was going to be Zach Wilson. It was just waiting on Roger Goodell to go up there and announce the pick and put the card in. And I was okay with it at that point. I mean, we had no other choice, but there was a lot of other Jet fans, and I will admit I thought I liked Zach more than Fields, but there was a lot of Jet fans that wanted Fields, and that's the funny part. It's now full circle. So they get their shot with Fields now. And maybe Fields works. If Fields works out, then we can look back at the 2021 draft class and say we found our quarterback of the future anyway. So, it'll all work out in the long run. But, yeah, that's Jets football for you. Find a way to get the 2 quarterbacks in 2021 already on their team. All right. Let's see. Which one do I want to go first? All right, we'll talk about good quarterback here. Dak Prescott will finish top 5 in MVP voting.
Ooh, that.
Now I went back. He was number 2 in 2023, behind Lamar, obviously. But that was it. That was the only time I believe he's ranked inside the top 10 or top 5.
All right. I am going to say false.
Okay.
I think, going off of last week's episode, I think Joe Burrow is winning the award. So
Mhm.
Joe Burrow obviously is going to be up there. I think Josh Allen's going to be up there again. I think Lamar's going to be up there again. And then you might throw a running back in there. I don't think Saquon has the same exact year that he has, but I think Saquon and Derrick Henry, actually, I think both of those round up 4 and 5 just as far as
Yeah.
how
Jahmyr
good
Gibbs.
of a season they may have. Jameer Gibbs is another one. Not
I'm
ridiculous
on
to
the
say
Jahmyr
that.
Gibbs. I'm on the
Um,
Jahmyr Gibbs train.
I think Dak finishes top 10, but I don't think he finishes top 5. Hopefully, I'm wrong. Hopefully, he wins the MVP, finally gets one. But just right now, I can't say he's gonna be top 5.
Yeah, I would probably agree. It would take another monster season. I agree with you. I think Burrow wins it. I think both of
Yeah,
us predicted that actually. If not, then I changed my
yeah.
prediction already. But I think I did. Um, yeah, I was gonna shift this to winning the MVP, but that is so, and not because it's Dak, but that's just so obvious false because it just feels like the Cowboys quarterback are not going to give it to
Yeah.
him. He can go out there and throw 60 touchdowns, and they find a way to say, "Oh, he's Lamar's got better rushing numbers" or something like that. Um,
Yeah.
but I agree with you. I think it's going to be some combination of Burrow. If I had to predict a top 5, it'd probably be Burrow, Allen, Lamar, Burrow, Allen, Lamar. That's 3, right? Burrow, Allen, Lamar.
We've
Yeah,
we've left
and
out
then
Mahomes. We
yeah,
have left out the
I was
best
gonna
quarterback in football.
I was gonna throw Mahomes in there, but I can even see, let's say Mahomes is kind of on the outside again, where it's, a Gibbs, Henry, Saquon number 4, and then you throw like a Jamar Chase in there at number 5 or something like that potentially,
Mhm.
or CeeDee Lamb in this case. He has that big of a year
Yeah.
where he's top 5 potentially. Um, Mahomes as well. I agree. We kind of left that one out, but Mahomes, if he gets back into that, last year Mahomes finished 6th, so he could be right back into the top 5 there. Um, you know, the guys that finished in front of him were Allen, Lamar, Barkley, Burrow, Goff, and then Mahomes. So yeah, I agree. I think that's probably it. I think Dak he's definitely top 10. He's definitely on the ballot, I think. Um,
Yeah.
he should be, I would assume. He's got 2 weapons now. Um, yeah, and I could see one of these guys falling off, like Darnold, Herbert,
Mhm.
probably even Daniels. Like, I don't think they're going to be. I don't necessarily know if
Yeah.
those 3 guys are going to be right back, because there was 11 on the ballot last year, or 11 that got votes. So yeah, um, but not top 5. I think I agree. I'd say false as well. All right, what do you got next?
All right. Last one. There's been some speculation, last last season about the Iowa State guy possibly being shipped. True or false? Is this year Brees Hall is no longer a Jet halfway throughout the season?
That's a good question. There's been a big topic amongst the Jets fans, especially this time of year where things have kind of been slow and you're just, coming up with things and just talking points. Um, I definitely could see a world where if the Jets are struggling, and more importantly, if you're seeing positives out of Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis, your other 2 running backs, where you feel like you can move on from Brees, and the whole idea of getting something for Brees because you're probably not bringing him back. I'm going to say false, though. I can see the world where he is traded. I can understand that, but I just don't think they will. And maybe this counters my point, but I just think Brees Hall is going to have a huge year. I really do. I think he's going to have a very big season. I have high expectations for Brees this year. I think they finally got an offensive coordinator who is going to use him properly, both from a rushing perspective and a receiving perspective, right? He just coming over from Detroit where they had an excellent 1-2 punch, in Gibbs and Montgomery. Brees didn't have that here. And last year, he wasn't good himself either. Like, he wasn't explosiveness, all that stuff. And he was dealing with a knee injury. He kind of admitted to that he clearly wasn't himself, but the coaching also didn't help him. Improved offensive line play should help as well. I think having Fields there, read option, RPOs, a lot of those things, you're going to see a lot of that. Mirror a bit of what Baltimore does, which I think is all good. I think Brees has a big year. I don't think he's going to get traded. I think the Jets are going to keep him around. We'll kind of see what happens. Is it a franchise tag situation? Do they let him walk? What all happens there? But I think the Jets are going to be, and they've got that week 9 bye week right in the middle of it. I think the Jets are going to be in a position, if I had to predict, they'll probably be, I think 3-5. I had them at the bye, where they're kind of in the mix. If they're 2-6 or worse, but let's say 2-6, because I don't even want to say the 1-7. But if they're 2-6, maybe. But I think if you're 3-5 or even 500, you're going to keep them around and see what you can get out of them the rest of the year. And I don't know. I don't know if I see this regime necessarily making that big of a move early on, but who knows? If he's, again, like I said, it could counter my point. If he has a monster year, that could fuel the trade Brees train, because it's like his value will be the highest, trade him, right? But I don't think he's a Jet long term, but I think he survives the season. So I'll say false, but it wouldn't totally surprise me. I mean, anytime a player like his caliber would get traded, there would always be a little bit of shock, but I'm going to say false. Maybe that's me just trying to hope that the Jets are in the mix and Brees going to have a big year and they're going to keep him around. Maybe that's it, but I don't know. I think he'll stick around, and I think the offseason next year will be interesting. Is it a tag situation? Does he go elsewhere? What all happens with that? So what do you think? It's interesting. It's you can make a strong case both ways, especially when you heard the rumors this year that there was some, or already this offseason, that there was some conversations around him. You know, it's definitely got some legs to it, no doubt. It's not like this is just out of left field in terms of the Brees Hall trade rumors. Like, there was legitimately probably some trade talks going on, or some discussion internally about moving on. So.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go false as well. I'm right, kind of on board with you. Depending on where they're looking at by the bye week, anything worse than 2-6 or worse, you move on. 3-5, 4-4, you kind of hold on, hoping that you can make a push. But I don't know if this is a thing amongst the Jets community, but I'm going to start a campaign for let Brees feast. I think he is
I like that.
a very good back. I'm right. I'm right with it. You should start that. Drop that in. Maybe a Jet Press article. Let Brees feast, because this is a guy I think doesn't get talked about enough, and I know he hasn't had the best start of his career, but he's a very solid back. And we've talked about this before multiple times, where you don't need a Derrick Henry, you don't need a Saquon Barkley. If you can get a guy in there to be consistent, hold on to the football, and just give you different elements of the game as a pass catcher and a rusher, you will have an efficient offense. I think that's what they had to let Brees do. You've talked about Jahmyr Gibbs possibly being, your offensive player of the year. I think we're going to see a lot of Jahmyr Gibbs-like moments from Brees this year, considering how they are going to use him. And also, just from the other side of it, you kind of want to rely more on the legs of Brees and the arm of Justin Fields. So if they want to see the most success out of Justin Fields, that is use his legs, hand the ball off to Brees, let the pass game open up. And don't get me wrong, I like Braylon Allen, but I don't think he's a 3-down back, just because he doesn't have the kind of speed that you need in the open field and that type of thing. More of your short yardage, your goal line. You want to keep that 1-2 punch. You stick with Brees. And again, I don't see the Jets sitting at 2-6 by the bye week or worse than that, but this is the NFL. You never know. This is a league of unknowns, but I think I'm also with false. Brees will stay a Jet throughout the season. Maybe going into next offseason, if things aren't looking promising, they move on. But right now, Glenn is going to stick it out, and I think he stays.
Yeah, I agree. And I like the Let Brees Feast campaign. I definitely am on board with that. And I would just say, too, not only just from the Brees perspective, but I think to get most out of Justin Fields this year and really see what you have in him, you want to have the most talent around him. This team's got a lot of talent. Like, keep this good talent around, keep this young talent around. I just mentioned a little bit ago, I think you're going to see a lot of read options, all that stuff from Fields and Brees, and they're going to benefit, I think, from each other, keep the defenses on their toes. That's something the Jets haven't been able to do. Nobody was scared of Aaron Rodgers' running ability. Now, to counter that, how much a team's going to be scared of Fields when he drops back? Well, not many, but that's where he's got to develop. That's where he's got to improve, and we'll see if Engstrand's able to get more out of him. But my point to all that is if you want the most out of Fields, and if Breece and Fields are having success and they are somewhere near 500, don't trade Breece, who could be Fields' the guy next to him who's leading him to a lot of success there in that backfield. That's another aspect of it as well. So, yeah, I highly doubt he's a Jet next year, but for this year, I think he's going to have a big year.
Yeah.
And the whole franchise tag thing, I think, I don't know if it'll go, like if he has a huge year this year, I don't know if that'll go over well. I don't know. That'd be interesting to see all what happens. All right. Final true or false here for the Cowboys. Similar running back one. And I'll be honest, I just doing some research here and doing a little bit of deeper diving into this. I did not know Rico Dowdle had a 1,000-yard year last year. I did not know that. I thought he was under that, but he just got over 1,000 yards. So my question is, will the Cowboys have a 1,000-yard rusher this season?
No. I don't think so. I don't think it's going to be terrible where we're talking about both backs in the 500. But first thing first, you don't know who RB1 is. We don't know if it's Javonte Williams. We don't know if it might be Miles Sanders. We don't know how much, touches Jaden Blue is going to get. And I think it's going to be running back by committee. I know depth chart has Javonte Williams listed as the number one, but I don't think that's going to be the case probably week 3 or week 4. But yeah, no. I think there's going to be production from the running back room. Just say, if it is Williams and Sanders or Blue, I think Williams might give you somewhere around 850, 875. Miles Sanders might back him up with about 5 or 6. And I think Jaden Blue gives you probably 3 or 4. But a 1,000-yard rusher, I don't see it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's also kind of what you said. It's going to be more by committee. It's going to be the hot hand. So I really don't know if, like last year, is it Dowdle or is it Dodell? Dowdle, right?
Yeah, it's Dowdle.
Dowdle. 235 carries last year, was far and away led the team. Next closest was Zeke at 74. I don't know if you're going to get that type of carry share this year. I think you're going to get more of, or carry discrepancy, I should say. I think you're going to get more of a balanced attack where it's the hot hand, Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, and even maybe a little bit of, Jaden Blue, of course, who they, took on day 3 out of Texas. And I just think that part of it, I don't really know if either guy's going to have a chance to get up to over 1,000. Unless if Javonte Williams runs away with it and has a season like he did his rookie year where he almost had 1,000. He was over 900. He had a productive year. Potentially that could be it. But also, I just think there's going to be a lot of times too, and this has been the case with the Cowboys a lot, where Dak, that offense is just on fire. There's no need to run the ball. Like Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, Dak, if they're hitting on all cylinders, are you really going to give the ball to Javonte Williams on a 1st and 10? Like, it's, I think last year, once Dak went down, obviously things changed within the offense. I find this crazy. Dak had 185 completions in 8 games. Cooper Rush had 187 in 12 games, which is crazy. The difference there. Only 6 games less or 4 games less, but 2 less completions.
Cooper Rush is not on the team no more. But I was going, anyways, after we're all done, said and done here, please send me that statistic because I guess people kind of forget that it's not that easy to move on from a quarterback that's, efficient. So, I'm not on rant along that. I got a lot of ranting to do during the season, trust me. But that's actually an interesting statistic that I was not aware of.
Yeah. No, yeah, it is interesting. And it's, I think kind of led to a lot more carries late in the year for Dowdle and that offense. where he had 235, which finished 15th, which doesn't seem right. It feels like they ran the ball a lot less, but he was top 15 in carries. So, yeah, but I agree. All right. That's true and false. Another true and false in the books. Will the Cowboys make the playoffs? That was my last one, but we all know I think you're true on that. I'm true on that. So I threw that in as the fourth one, but no real need to discuss that, especially when we did the NFC rankings. So, any closing thoughts?
Oh, no, that's all. We will be back next week, a week closer to the Hall of Fame game. And thank you for watching as usual.
Yes. 1 week to go, or another week down, I should say. 1 week closer. Next week will be the 14th, 13th, whenever we record. And in that, after that week, that next week, so 2 weeks, when we hit the 20th, teams are going to start to report. I know the Jets report the 22nd. I think rookies for the Jets report like the 18th. So we're really only about 11 days away, 20 or 11 days away, 14 days away for veterans and all that. So we're getting closer. It's right around the corner, about 2 weeks left. So stay tuned for that. Season right around the corner, preseason, training camp, all that good stuff. We'll be here for it all. And until next time, make sure to please like and subscribe. Appreciate all the support, and we'll talk to you soon.